about the church of Thessalonica. It says that Paul went to Athens and he waited there alone എന്ന് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് because we are not able to reconcile these two, and then later Acts chapter 18 verse 1 and 18 verse 5 okay, it is written very clearly that Paul, Timothy and Silas, they joined Paul there, and normally letter എഴുതുമ്പോൾ when you start 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 verse 1 okay, it says Paul, Silvanus or Silas and Timothy. So ഇവർ മൂന്ന് പേരും കൂടെ എഴുതുന്ന ഒരു, or Paul is writing it, but if not the first. Okay, and it was, who was it written to sit, but he does not give any clues, no nothing. Last week we were hearing Pastor Anish Koruthon, he was giving some analysis and things like that. Paul did not give anything like that, right? Pastor learning pastor പറഞ്ഞതിൻ്റെ ഒന്നും അടുത്തൂടെ Paul പോയിട്ടില്ല ഇന്നത്തെ Thessalonians. Maybe they would want to hear something like what pastor told, right? കുറച്ചൊക്കെ current events ഒക്കെ വെച്ച് connect ചെയ്ത്. But Paul just gave like a very, he'll come like a thief in the night എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞങ്ങ് വിട്ടു. So they were also, നമ്മളെന്ത് ചോദിച്ചു, പുള്ളി എന്ത് പറഞ്ഞെന്ന് അതുപോലെ ആയിപ്പോയി, right? So those were the things. Now when we come to 2 Thessalonians, right? Now why did ഞാൻ ഈ റീക്യാപ്പ് എടുത്തതിൻ്റെ റീസൺ എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഈ ലെറ്റേഴ്സ് ഭയങ്കര കണക്റ്റഡാണ്. ഓക്കെ, ബിക്കോസ് 1 Thessalonians എഴുതി കഴിഞ്ഞ് without much time passing he writes 2 Thessalonians, and there is a reason for that also. Right? Because he felt, and we'll come to that, right? So who wrote 2 Thessalonians? If you look at chapter 1 verse 1, yeah, Paul, Silvanus, Timothy. So it is widely attributed Paul thaniyana ezhudiyathu because it's written in verse 1. Pakshe there is still a lot of discussion among Bible scholars, right? Did Paul really write Did Paul really write 2 Thessalonians? Now, there is a reason why, Bible scholars argue. അവർക്കു വേറെ ഒരു പണി ഇല്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് ആർഗ്യൂ ചെയ്യുന്നതല്ല. There is a reason, because somewhere in the middle of the 2nd century AD, okay, there were like 3 books that came, 3 letters that suddenly came out of nowhere. Okay, one of the letters is the 3rd letter to Corinthians, then a letter called the Epistle to Alexandria, and then another called an epistle to Laodicea, to the Laodicean church. And idellathinne authorship is attributed to Paul, but it came out of nowhere. ആ ചർച്ചുകാർക്ക് അറിയത്തില്ല, നമ്മൾ കേട്ടിട്ടില്ല ഇതെന്ത് നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടി ഒരു ലെറ്റർ, റൈറ്റ്? ഇറ്റ് കെയിം ലൈക്ക് ദാറ്റ്. ബട്ട് സോ സം അതർ ഓതേഴ്സ്, they wrote these letters, they tried to copy Paul's style. See if I ഇപ്പം sometimes നമുക്ക് ഈ വാട്സാപ്പിൽ ഈ ഫോർവേഡ് ഒക്കെ ചിലപ്പം കിട്ടാറുണ്ട്. ഈ വാട്സാപ്പ് ഫോർവേഡ് കിട്ടുമ്പം അത് ടൈപ്പ് ചെയ്ത ആൾ ചിലപ്പം പറയും നാസ സയൻറ്റിസ്റ്റ് സെഡ് സംതിങ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ദിസ് സയൻറ്റിസ്റ്റ് സെഡ്, ഓർ ദ US കാർഡിയാക് ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെൻറ്റ് did something. They are attributing it to some authoritative agency so that അവർ എഴുതുന്ന സാധനങ്ങൾ ആൾക്കാരൊന്ന് വായിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി. അതുപോലെ whoever wrote these letters to these churches, to give authority to it, they started using Paul's name. This is after Paul, so Paul could not come and say illa njanalla ezhudiya, he could not come and say. But the early church fathers, they were able to find and they were able to refute these things. So because there are some instances like this, ingane chala aalkare cheyan ശ്രമിച്ചതുകൊണ്ട് in the 2nd century AD, every letter in the Bible that is attributed to Paul, even if it is very clearly said, scholars, they argue that. I think it is, that argument is a little bit healthy, right? So you are able to debate it, and one of the good things about Bible, good and maybe sometimes it goes in the wrong way, is that every book in the Bible has been widely studied, even criticized by many people, right? So ചിലപ്പോൾ അത് നമുക്ക് കേൾക്കുമ്പം we may feel a little bad, but one unintended good consequence of this criticism is that when scholars, they academically at least, they argue and they give points and they debate, you come out of it, the final conclusion means that okay, this is a book that has been, or this even the authorship has been widely attributed, studied, these are the proof points. It is very clear to a lot of people. So that is the Bible is different that way, versus if you look at some other religious books, you cannot say one word against it. Like if you say it, you're in trouble, right? There will be a target behind your back, people will try to attack you. So that way Now the Bible, at least it's very open that way. It has been widely studied a lot. So there is a book called the Epistle to Laodicea, which yeah. So the Epistle to Laodicea, I don't know if it is the same, Uncle, what you're referring to. The Epistle to Laodicea is like a 6 or 7 chapter book that is attributed, like you said, the lost books of the Bible. There is like a Gospel of Saint Thomas. Then there is even a Gospel of Judas Iscariot. I mean, there are a lot of books that are there. The reason why some of these books are not attributed to and why is it not in our original Bible is because it is not consistent with the other messages of the Bible. So if, let's say that, and I've not read the Epistle of Laodicea, so I don't know the details, but the reason why it is not being attributed is because there are some internal and external evidences are not matching up. And if it has not matched up, it has not made it to the 66 books of the Bible. Similarly, if you look at the Catholic Bible, they have some apocryphal books. That also has not made it to the King James Version because of some inconsistencies in history or what that message is saying. So, but there are people who still refer to some of these books. These books are available. I think even on the internet, if you search, you can get maybe PDF copies of some of these books. So, and there is even a book called the Lost Books of the Bible, which has many of these, this and many more. But again, depending on which scholar you're talking to, they have an opinion on, yes, it should be in the Bible or should not be in the Bible. There are pros and cons. But the general consensus is, if it doesn't meet certain criteria, it will not have made to the book. And the Council of Nicaea and all, they use some of these parameters to decide what came into the Bible. Yeah, but thank you, good point. Okay, so I was saying in 2 Thessalonians, who wrote, we were saying Paul wrote, right? And why it is being attributed this way. The next question is, where do you think this was written? 2 Thessalonians. Yeah, it is because this was written in short order. Most likely it was written in Corinth itself. When was it written? It was written shortly after First Thessalonians. And people say, and the general concern, though it doesn't say that why Paul immediately wrote another letter in a few months, or in a few, maybe a couple of years, but in a very short period of time. So First Thessalonians was written when Paul was very worried. We read that in Acts chapter 17. Paul, he was preaching in Thessalonica. The Jews there created trouble, and then he had to escape in the night. Right, in midnight he escaped. Next morning he was not there. So Jason, who is mentioned in the Bible once, was then brought before the council. He had to pay a fine or put some bail, and he was let go. But Paul disappeared at night. So Paul wanted to explain, hey, well, this is why I disappeared at night, right? So number one. Second, in First Thessalonians, so after that, Timothy goes and he gives a good report, right? And that is why Paul writes First Thessalonians in a very warm way, right? Hey, my report is this, and he commends the church. But then when Timothy went to deliver the first letter, Timothy saw a few things, right? This is Timothy's second trip. He went once to Thessalonica, gave a good report. Then Paul writes a letter, gives it to Timothy. Timothy takes it back. And this time Timothy comes back with another report to Paul. And Paul hears that, and it stirs up something in him, and he writes the 2 Thessalonians. Okay, and we are going to see in 2 Thessalonians what is it that caused Paul to write this second letter almost immediately, one after the other, right? What is that? So we will go through that. It is written short. So when was it written? Shortly after First Thessalonians. To whom was it addressed to? Who is the audience? Church of Thessalonica. Okay. Now we'll come to why Paul wrote this, and we'll go in more detail. But I'll just give you. There are 3 reasons. Okay, why Paul wrote this letter mainly. First one is, this letter also there is encouragement in this letter. So there is, and there are some parallels, right? If you can take 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 4. Can someone read 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4?
ഞങ്ങളെ സുവിശേഷം ഫലമേൽപ്പിക്കേണ്ടതിന് ഞങ്ങൾ ദൈവത്തിന് കൊള്ളാവുന്നവരായി തെളിഞ്ഞതുപോലെ ഞങ്ങൾ മനുഷ്യരെയല്ല ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഹൃദയം ശോധന ചെയ്യുന്ന ദൈവത്തെ അത്രേ പ്രസാദിപ്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നത്.
Okay, so there is one encouragement there. Can you also read chapter 3, 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 verses 3 to 5? Yeah, anything is fine. English or Malayalam is fine. 3 to 5.
കഷ്ടം അനുഭവിപ്പാൻ നാം നിയമിക്കപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് നിങ്ങൾ തന്നെ അറിയുന്നുവല്ലോ. നാം കഷ്ടം അനുഭവിക്കേണ്ടി വരുമെന്ന് ഞങ്ങൾ നിങ്ങളോട് കൂടെ ഇരുന്നപ്പോൾ മുൻകൂട്ടി പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുമുണ്ട്. അവണ്ണം തന്നെ സംഭവിച്ചു എന്ന് നിങ്ങൾ അറിയുന്നു.
So 5
ഇത് നിമിത്തം എനിക്ക് ഒട്ടും സഹിച്ചുകൂടാഞ്ഞിട്ട് പരീക്ഷകൻ നിങ്ങളെ പരീക്ഷിച്ചോ ഞങ്ങളുടെ പ്രയത്നം വെറുതെ ആയിപ്പോയോ എന്ന് ഭയപ്പെടുത്താൻ നിങ്ങളുടെ വിശ്വാസത്തിന്റെ വസ്തുത അറിയേണ്ടതിനാണ് അയച്ചു.
Okay, so see in both these chapters, if you look at it, Paul is giving some encouragement. കാരണം അവർക്ക് ഒത്തിരി ഓപ്പോസിഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, right? They were going through the church, going through persecution. So Paul is giving some encouragement, right? In both these verses, he's encouraging them that, okay, I understand you're going through persecution, but you're holding fast. So there is some encouraging persecution. But in 2 Thessalonians, he just increases that a little bit. So the first, it is a major concern for Paul in the second letter, that they are going through persecution, their faith, they should be strong in faith, and that they be encouraged while they are going through this opposition. So First Thessalonians, those 3 verses that we read, in 2 Thessalonians, this is a major concern for Paul. So that is the first reason why he writes this letter. Encouragement during a time of opposition. Then in the first letter, if one of the questions that people had was, what will happen to the dead when Christ comes? Did they miss their chance for resurrection? Did they miss their chance when Christ comes again? They're already dead. What happens? So Paul addresses that directly. And that is a portion we read in funerals, right? The dead will rise first. So we read that during funerals. So Paul addresses that. However, if you can read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 2.
കർത്താവിന്റെ നാൾ അടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് വെച്ച് നിങ്ങൾ വല്ല ആത്മാവിനാലോ വചനത്താലോ ഞങ്ങൾ എഴുതി എന്ന ഭാവത്തിലുള്ള ലേഖനത്താലോ സുബോധം വിട്ട് വേഗത്തിൽ ഇളകുകയും ഞെട്ടിപ്പോവുകയും അരുത്.
So he's bringing that concern as well, right? This was in the first letter, the concern was about what will happen to the dead during the day of the Lord. In the second letter, it's the same thought, but he's trying to address a teaching that the day of the Lord already had occurred. Christ already came. And then the people are like, hey, then what are we doing? Like, we are going through persecution, we are waiting with hope. So he's addressing that directly. Okay, that is the second reason for why he writes a letter. And then the third reason why he writes this letter is because some people in the church were behaving in a disorderly fashion, right? They were not working. They were becoming a burden to the other church members. They were getting into the affairs of other people. Right? They were becoming like a busybody, what we say. They were trying to more interested in the affairs of other people rather than working, things like that, right? So these are the 3 main reasons why he writes this letter. Okay. So third one, he wanted to correct some people who were behaving in a disorderly fashion, not working. Instead, they became a burden to the other church members. So he wanted to correct them and tell them that no, you should work and not just simply rely on the generosity of the other church members.
Those people, are they believers or
they are church members? They are people in the church who are not working. So we'll look at that as well. Okay. So these were the 3 main reasons. So if you look at it, it's a short letter, right? It only has 3 chapters. It's a very short letter. But he immediately wrote it because he said, first letter ഞാൻ മിസ്സായി പോയി, or I heard something more, so I want to give you some more instruction. So immediately sends the second letter with Timothy. So who wrote it? Paul wrote this letter. Where did he write? Most likely Corinth. When did he write this? Yes, shortly after First Thessalonians. To whom did he write this letter? Church of Thessalonica. Why did he write? 3 reasons. Encouragement in opposition. Then so the second reason is addressing some teaching about the second coming of Christ, day of the Lord. Third one is correcting people who are becoming a burden to other church members. They were not working, they were not minding, they were looking at other people's businesses and their affairs and not really working, right? So 3 reasons. Having said this, let's get to 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. Let's read the first 4 verses. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, first 4 verses.
പൗലോസും സിൽവാനോസും തിമത്തിയോസും പിതാവായ ദൈവത്തിലും കർത്താവായ യേശുക്രിസ്തുവിലുമുള്ള തെസ്സലോനിക്ക സഭയ്ക്ക് എഴുതുന്നത്. പിതാവായ ദൈവത്തിങ്കിൽ നിന്നും കർത്താവായ യേശുക്രിസ്തുവിങ്കിൽ നിന്നും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് കൃപയും സമാധാനവും ഉണ്ടാകട്ടെ. സഹോദരന്മാരെ, നിങ്ങളുടെ വിശ്വാസം ഏറ്റവും വർദ്ധിച്ചും ആളാം പ്രതി നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും അന്യോന്യ സ്നേഹം പെരുകിയും വരികയാൽ ഞങ്ങൾ യോഗ്യമാകും വണ്ണം ദൈവത്തിന് എപ്പോഴും നിങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ച് സ്തോത്രം ചെയ്യുവാൻ കടംപെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ട് നിങ്ങൾ സഹിക്കുന്ന സകല ഉപദ്രവങ്ങളിലും കഷ്ടങ്ങളിലുമുള്ള നിങ്ങളുടെ സഹിഷ്ണുതയും വിശ്വാസവും നിമിത്തം ഞങ്ങൾ ദൈവത്തിന്റെ സഭകളിൽ നിങ്ങളെ ചൊല്ലി പ്രശംസിക്കുന്നു.
Okay, thank you. So again, Paul is when he writes this letter also, he's saying, he's addressing it from, it's coming from 3 people: Paul, Silas, and Timothy, and directly to the church in Thessalonians. Now I want to draw some parallels, right? So I want to compare the greeting that he's giving here with the greeting he's giving in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. So let us just do that, right? So if we can look at in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, his greeting is a little similar, but there are some key differences. The first verse I'll read starts, Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy, to the church of the Thessalonians in God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Grace to you and peace. Okay? If you look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, he says, Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy. That's exactly the same. To the church of the Thessalonians in God, he says, our Father. Right? Previously he said, God the Father. He makes it a little personalized here. Okay? And the Lord Jesus Christ. And there he's, in 1 Thessalonians, he just says, grace to you and peace. Now he goes and says, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. You see, it looks identical, but he's made it a little bit more personalized, right? He's trying to, and this is, and you'll see there's a reason why he's doing this. Because he's not going to go into thanksgiving and encouragement. So he's setting the stage by saying, this is not God the Father, it is God our Father, right? He's making it hyper personalized. And he says, grace to you and peace from, not from Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy, but grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. This peace is not given from me, but it is coming from our God, it is coming from our Lord Jesus Christ. Because peace is a theme you'll see in 1 Timothy, because they are going through a lot of persecution. And this persecution was more intense than what Paul thought initially. That is why he wrote the second letter immediately. In the first letter, he says he's worried about, that they're going through persecution, and he encourages them. But then when he hears Timothy's report, he knows that this persecution is more intense than I thought it was, or it is not coming down, it is just increasing. So he starts off with this theme, right? Now, the first 4 verses that we read, right, there is a greeting and then it goes into thanksgiving, right? So see, thanksgiving is always central to any of Paul's letters. That is his style, right? He starts with this, and it is not because it is his literary style of writing, right? It is a very key teaching that Paul tries to give us here when it comes to thanksgiving. see, in US and Canada, we have a day of Thanksgiving, right? If you really look at history, I think Abraham Lincoln set it up in I think 1863. I think 1863 during the Civil War, he thought it would be a good thing for people to take a day off the war and just be thankful about what we have. Uh, it is so. So I think what he was trying to do is trying to build that into the DNA of the people of the nation. There is thanksgiving in the DNA of, let's say, of Israel in general, because right from the beginning they had thanksgiving offerings that they had to offer. So it is something that God tried to institute into the DNA of people. But see, and I say this because it is key, because we use the word thanks as an etiquette, as good manners. Like someone gives you a coffee, a barista gives you coffee, you say thank you. You're not grateful, really, right? It is good manners, right? The word thank you, or the word thanks, right? You use it as more as etiquette for and good manners. It's not that my heart is filled with gratitude that I got coffee that I paid for. Right? It's nothing. I should get coffee. If the barista does not give you good coffee, you're going to complain immediately after that, right? Your gratitude is gone in a second. That is not gratitude, right? That is etiquette. uh, Thankfulness, right? It's again, gratitude is a posture of the heart, right? And gratitude is something that does not disappear instantly after that act is done. And I say this because I've heard, I saw this, or I think I read it in a book about a farmer who bought a large parcel of land. He tilled it, and there was a harvest that came. And then when the harvest came, now he was raised up in a Christian family. This is old American during the times of Civil War. So he sits and prays something like this: Lord, I thank you for for the harvest we have. Though I purchased it from a loan from the money lender, and I tilled the land and backbreaking work for 6 months, I finally have an harvest so my family can eat. Thank you. That is not gratitude. That is, again, my parents taught me to say thanks before a meal or something, so I'm just doing it. Gratitude is a posture of the heart. It really doesn't matter your words. Some people can speak very eloquently and say a lot of nice words about gratitude, right? But some people may not have this. But at the end of the day, it is about what fills your heart, right? Where is it coming from? Because we can learn to say a lot of good words. You spend enough time in the church, you will get a very beautiful template of prayer, right? Because you have heard so many types of prayer, right? You get a very good template. I'm not saying words don't matter, words do matter. But what matters even more is a posture of your heart, because a simple thank you and a thank you written in a page, both can come from the same intensity, right? So it is always a posture of the heart. And I say this because when we look at verse 3, Paul starts this off by saying, and my version it's saying, we ought always to give thanks to God for you. And Chiji, I think you read Kadapattirikkunnu, right? In Malayalam, illa Kadapattirikkunnu. It is like an obligation to give thanks, right? It is there another version, English version anybody else has? We are bound to thank you, right? So it is not that he's showing that there is some sort of an obligation to give thanks, right? That word, we ought to give thanks, kadapattirikkunnu, bound to give thanks, it is showing a certain amount of obligation. And this again, he's saying it's because we ought to give thanks to whom? Not to the Thessalonian church, to God, right? We ought to give thanks to God because we are bound to give thanks to God. We're obligated to give thanks to God, right? For you, brothers, as is right, right? Because that is what we have to do, because your faith is growing abundantly and the love of everyone of you for one another is increasing. Now, verse 3 to 10, right, in the English Bible and the Malayalam Bible, it is one long Greek sentence, right? So we've seen the similar long Greek sentences everywhere. In Greek, you can write a really long sentence that still makes sense. In English, if you write such a big sentence, we lose all the meanings. I still don't know after all these years when to use a semicolon exactly. I don't. I always mess that up, even now. Do you know? I have no idea. Huh? When you take a breath. Yeah, maybe that is what it is. But I'm just saying that the punctuations can get very confusing, and I think it is the right thing that the English and Malayalam translators what they did is by breaking it down into sentences so that it doesn't lose its meaning, right? So you keep the meaning intact and maybe you structure it differently. But I'm saying that 3 to 10. So we have to read this not as, sometimes we tend to read, verses when I'm teaching my son, sometimes memory verses, I teach 2 verses, right? Or Merin teaches 2 verses because it is easy to do that. But sometimes we lose the context because we are taking part of one long sentence. We are picking 2 pieces out of it, so that context is completely missed from the same sentence. I'm not even talking about the same chapter. Okay, so 3 to 10, you have to read it as one because it is one thing. Okay, so but we are today looking at only 3 and 4. Okay, but after I covered this, we'll read 3 to 10 together and we'll understand what Paul is trying to say. So uh, the first part of 3 in the English Bible, we ought to give thanks. It talks about the obligation of thanks. The second part he says is about growing faith and love. Okay, that is what he's talking about. He says growing, uh, we give thanks because your faith is growing abundantly and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing. So there is growth there, right? Is there another translation? Can someone read? How is that? Verse 3?
We are bound to thank God always for you,
Yeah,
brethren, as it is fitting, because your faith grows exceedingly,
yeah,
and the love of every one of you will abound toward each other.
each other. Okay. If your faith grows exceedingly, here it says your faith is growing abundantly. മലയാളത്തിൽ എങ്ങനെ പറയുന്നത്? ഏറ്റവും വർദ്ധിച്ചു. Okay. Now this is all coming from this is one of the rare instances where Paul is using a Greek word called, and I hope I pronounce this right, it is hyperoxano, right, with that thing over the O. So I don't know if it's a short O or a long O. Okay, it's hyperoxano. It means the word, it has the word hyper before it, right? It means it is rapidly increasing, like there is, uncontrollably increasing. It is a superlative term of growth. It is not just growing, it is hyperexano. It is growing exceedingly, very fast, rapidly, right? And because in 2 Corinthians 10:5, right? Can someone take 2 Corinthians verse 10, chapter 10, verse 5?
അവയാൽ ഞങ്ങൾ സങ്കല്പങ്ങളും ദൈവത്തിന്റെ പരിജ്ഞാനത്തിന് വിരോധമായി പൊങ്ങുന്ന എല്ലാ ഉയർച്ചയും ഇടിച്ചു കളഞ്ഞ് ഏത് വിചാരത്തെയും ക്രിസ്തുവിനോടുള്ള അനുസരണത്തിനായിട്ട് തിരിച്ചടക്കി നിങ്ങളുടെ അനുസരണം തികഞ്ഞു വരുമ്പോൾ എല്ലാ അനുസരണക്കേടിനും പ്രതികാരം ചെയ്യുവാൻ ഒരുങ്ങിയും ഇരിക്കുന്നു.
Yeah. So here also he uses the word of a growing faith. I'm looking, did I get the wrong one? Maybe I did miss it. 1 Corinthians 10:5. Where I was trying to go with this is the second place where Paul uses about a growth. No, it's not 1:5 as well. But and I'll maybe correct the reference. But obedience is fulfilled. Yeah, it was again talking about the growing faith. I'll come back with the right reference. So maybe I wrote this wrong. He was again talking about growth, but it was a growth without the word hyper, right? It was just rexano, right? Which means your faith it was growing. So the difference is there is a regular growth, and here he is talking about rapidly growing, exceeding growth, right? So their faith, the growth in their faith and love was not normal. So this was a superlative way of encouraging them, because it's saying that your growth is exceeding. Like, I'm so surprised. This is the highest term of Greek that I can use for hyperexano type of growth, right? Growing faith and love. Now, but it comes down to this one thing. What should growing faith, what should it cause us to do? Our faith is growing. It shows that our faith should grow. In the Thessalonians church also, the faith was growing. What should growing faith lead us to?
Destroy the persecutions or oppositions, arguments. That can be
that can come, yes.
controlled.
Become more like Christ. You said love. You said, yeah, love for each other. The the one important thing is that we should take from here is faith and love. These are not static. It is not that I got faith and that is it. It is a journey, right? Our faith should grow, and as our faith increases, when we start, we have some faith, right? Sometimes the when you first got saved, when you think about it, there is a joy of salvation that we have. There's a lot of faith we had there, but as you go through Christian life, ideally what we go through ups and downs, right? So the ups and downs are like this, but the idea is that it should still, over a period of time, it should still be growing, right? Though there are small valleys. The idea is that as my faith grows, as all of our faith grows, it should increase our commitment to Christ, right? Increase, more love grows towards Christ. It increases our commitment to church, towards each other, to our community. That is an outcome of our growth in faith. And so this is what Paul is saying here, right? And he's saying that your faith is growing abundantly, love for each one is increasing. And then he says, and he says that it is growing abundantly, right? So it is present, continuous tense. It is not it has grown, or there was some growth in the past. That is not what he's saying. He's saying that he's seeing it happen. It is happening, continually happening, right? And then uh, he goes on to say in verse 4 that I am boasting to other churches, right? So we boast to other churches. We boast about you in churches of God for your steadfastness and faith in all your persecutions and afflictions. So if I look at the first part, if you look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, don't have to take, I'll just tell you. Chapter 2, verse 19, Paul says that, and the second coming at Parousia, we will boast about you, right? We'll boast about the Thessalonian church. He says in 1:7 that Thessalonian church, you are a model church to Macedonia and to church and Achaia, right? You are a model church. So in 1 Thessalonians also he says he boasts, but here he's saying that we are going to boast about you in the churches of God for your faith, for your steadfastness, in all the persecutions that you are going through. Now, you'll see here in chapter 1, right? So, in the first letter to Thessalonians, Paul talks about persecutions and trials a total of 4 times, right? So, we read 2 verses today, 3 verses today, total of 4 times. But here in 2 Thessalonians, in the first chapter itself, he talks about it 5 times. Okay, and then he also, not only that, he also says that how Jesus will bring a judgment, right? Encourages them that way. So when someone writes a letter and the first paragraph, when they're addressing something, that is what is there in their heart, right? So this is top of his mind, right? And he's addressing that. So this is a key theme for Paul over here. We are close to time, so we can close over here slowly. So let's quickly to recap, right? We saw the first 4 verses. Uh, peace is a theme when it comes to this particular chapter, right? And Paul, verses 3 and 4 is about thanksgiving, right? And Paul is saying that we are obligated to give thanks, right? We ought to give thanks, right? I have to give thanks, kadapattirikkunnu, right? To give thanks to God as it is right for your faith, not your normal faith, but your exceedingly growing faith, right? Your hyperexano faith, right? Your faith that is growing like anything, right? Exceedingly growing faith and your love, and 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 because of that, we are able to boast about you to other churches in the region, that you are having this faith, your steadfastness in the middle of persecutions and all the troubles that you're facing. And then we'll see in the next coming verses where he talks about the judgment at Christ's coming, right? Because he's trying to address a problem that we are going through all of this persecution, and my enemies seem to, it's like in the Psalms, right? My enemies seem to be all fine and I'm going through all of this. Has Christ already come and gone? Is that why? Am I left behind? Is that why I'm suffering? Right? So he's trying to address some of those questions here. Any questions, thoughts?
ഇതിപ്പോ നമ്മുടെ പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ജീവിതത്തിൽ ഇതൊന്നും ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്നാ പ്രയോജനം?
പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ജീവിതത്തിൽ
ഈ
എന്തില്ലെങ്കിലും
സ്നേഹമോ ഈ കരുതലോ ഞാനെല്ലാത്തിനും മേലില്
അതെ.
ഈ സ്നേഹം എൻ്റെ കൂട്ട സഹോദരനെ
അതെ
എൻ്റെ കൂട്ട സഹോദരിയെ എന്നെ പോലെ കാണാനോ എന്നെക്കാളും ഉയർന്ന് അവരെ കാണാനോ എനിക്ക് താല്പര്യമില്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് തന്നെ പറയുന്നല്ലോ.
അതെ
ഇതുപോലെ നിങ്ങള് കൂട്ട സഹോദരനെ നിന്നെ പോലെ സ്നേഹിക്കണം, അറിഞ്ഞിരിക്കണം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അറിയണം ഒരു വിശ്വാസി. അതറിയത്തില്ലെങ്കിൽ പിന്നെ
കറക്റ്റ്,
നമ്മൾ ഈ ചെയ്യുന്നതൊന്നും
ഒരു കാര്യമില്ല. കറക്റ്റ്. യാ അതെ. Any other thoughts?
ഇതിൻ്റെയൊക്കെ എവിഡൻസ് എന്തുവാ?
ഏതിൻ്റെ?
സൂപ്പർ ഫാസ്റ്റ് ഗ്രോയിങ് ഓഫ് ഫെയ്ത്ത്.
Yeah.
That is what Paul expects.
That is, but he's saying this. This is the faith that he is seeing in the Thessalonian church. I'm giving thanks for your hyper growth of faith and love. So, but ഈ ഒരു വാക്ക് പുള്ളി ഇവിടെ മാത്രമേ യൂസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളൂ, ഈ വേർഡ്. യാ, അതിന് എന്തോ എവിഡൻസ് യു ആർ ആസ്കിങ് വാട്ട് ഇറ്റ്, I don't know, maybe something that Timothy's report had that.
From the report of
Timothy, yeah. So he doesn't say exactly what it is, but he just says that it is so much that I boast about you to other churches. So whatever report Timothy gave, that it was good enough that Paul is impressed and he's taking this to other churches and say, you see that Thessalonian church, he's able to boast on that, right? So like somebody looks at BICA church and says, you see BICA church? It's a small church in Tulsa, but look at where they are. So like Auntie said, right, maybe it is the love that we show to each other, to the community, to others who need. That may be the evidence. What exactly is evidence, we don't know. But
in between it wrote that this type of faith, it causes commitment.
yeah, it should. So a growing faith, the evidence of a growing faith is that it shows an increased commitment to God. So and that is evidence of my faith growing. So is my commitment to God increasing? If I'm saying that my love is increasing, what is the outcome of increasing love should be that I start caring, I start feeling more about the real needs of people.
The other people also feel the same, that the love is there.
Is there.
The sister is loving me.
Yes.
And I can feel it in my within me that this sister, she's real.
Yeah.
She has that love of Jesus in her.
Correct.
That we have to show ourselves to others.
Others,
right?
yeah. I know, I agree.
Faith is faith and love to some extent. For some persons,
Yeah.
it is hidden. It is confidential or kept
Yeah.
inside.
Correct.
Internal.
Yes.
But when it is not expressed outwardly,
Yeah.
how will come to know that he has faith and love?
So, see, I think, and we'll pray and stuff. Yeah.
Maybe
Next time we'll start with this. How do we express hidden faith, right? We'll talk about this next week. Can you pray, please?
Hallelujah.